Hi everyone, welcome back to the new video of Alif Consulting, and today we are going to talk on an interesting topic. But just before we get started with this topic, let me tell you that my name is Rizwan Patel, and I am one of the senior consultants with Alif Consulting, and we would be starting this new topic with Mailflow and what is Mailflow and how it works within Office 365 and what are the consequences for that and why Mailflow is being important in Office 365 from Exchange's perspective and what topic covers it up. So when we speak about Mailflow, so the very first question which comes to our brain is what is Mailflow and why is it required? So it is the simple answer to that is as if why Mailflow is required is to flow the emails across your organization or send emails from your organization across internet to different recipients. So for a Mailflow, it is quite a security concern. When everything is in place, there is, the function works quite well. But let's say if there's any flaw within any of the product when it comes to the product environment, it needs to be fulfilled and confirm that each and every product which we run under some a certain flow, and that has to be an ecosystem. What if this and what if this is not? So to avoid or that, many of the organization prepares up their ecosystem as if how does a product is going to be supportive when a certain amount of rules or certain set of rules does not work with it. So one of that important topic within Exchange itself or within Office 365 is mail flow, because if we would think about stopping this topic or skipping this topic, so it simply means that we are completely making our Office 365's mail flow or email services on a toss, because mail flow is a concept where if this stuff gets started, so irrespective of whether we are sending emails inside the organization, that is internal emails, or outside the organization come to be as external emails, all of them would go for a toss. So we need to understand as what is mailflow and how does it work. So in simple terms, mailflow is actually an email protection services which is being provided to us by Office 365. In this term, it is called as Exchange Online, or you can also call it as Exchange Online Protection, and it has its own architecture with certain rules with it, as if how mail support works with a specific organization and how we can reach that. So within mail flow, yes, so there has to be always two things. Connectors are the most important medium for a mail flow to be working, and in order to work your mail flow quite efficiently, connectors play an important role. And what are connectors, we are going to see that in our next slide. But before that, we also need to have a quick understanding on what gateway services or email services are there. So as far as cloud is related to, when we talk about Office 365, so yes, there is Exchange Online Protection, and similar to that we have multiple filtering services available over the internet which are called as filtering services, gateway services, email gateway services, or services providing your filtering. When we talk about filtering, it includes a multiple layer which comes with spam filtering, content filtering, connection filtering, and many more things. But those are the stuff which would come into the picture on a later priority, wherein these things has to flow on with some DNS records called as MX records, which is the most important record for an email to be received in by the recipient, and the check is always being done on the recipient's end. But yes, we need to get this records configured on the sender's side, so whenever we send an email, that email is being treated as a legit email, as a legitimate email from the recipient. And all these things are also based on your IP addresses, your domain names, if no RBLs are being flagged wherein they do not meet any blockages, that the IP addresses behind your domains are being blocked by any RBL. So we should not be having any RBLs, which means that our IP addresses have a good reputation over the internet, and we can use those IP addresses in order to be able to send or receive emails. But along with it, There are certain services or providers like Mimecast, Proofpoint, Barracuda, Symantec, and many more. So what these services or these vendors provide you the same email filtering or the gateway services, wherein they take care of your emails, email security. You can say whenever an email comes in, these things, these vendors would take care that there should be no spoof emails, no spam emails, or no fishy emails, due to which, many of the attackers over the internet sit and try to spoof someone's domain, and blockages are done. So in order to prevent this, these filtering services takes care of it, of which one of the most important service which is being supported with Office 365 is EOP, that is Exchange Online Protection, and we are going to discuss on that. But amongst all these things, whether an email should go out or come in, the most important parameter for that is, or the concept for that is, connectors. Now what is it? There it is. What is a connector? So in simple words, connector is a set of instruction that customizes the way your email flows. Meaning, connector, you can treat a connector as a medium, as an intermediate, that we would be telling that connector that if I need to send this email outside my organization, you are the source of medium which would be forwarding or would be taking this email or the content from my organization to outside the internet, and how it would be flowing up, we would discuss that. And it contains your mail flow. Meaning, let's say if I would be defining any connector, so any emails going out matching that connector's parameter with the help of a transport rule or an IP address or any such stuff, so that is actually dependent on the connectors. So it is most important thing that whenever an account gets compromised or the complete organization gets compromised, the very first thing we check is the connectors. Was there any connector, any suspicious connector which got created, due to which Office 365 trusted on that connector and started sending out emails using that connector? Because if we do this, ultimately the mailboxes which are hosted on Office 365 using those connectors, it would start sending out bulk emails over the internet. And a certain point would come when Office 365 itself would put a blockage on that emails, because ultimately, if the emails are sending out from Office 365's mailbox using EOP, definitely Microsoft's IP addresses are going to get used, and Microsoft would not like their IP addresses to get blacklisted or to get with bad reputation. So in order to avoid that, Microsoft itself would block that IP address that would be from the organization, and no such emails would be allowed to flow outside the organization. So we need to keep a very close eye whenever we send emails outside the organization using connectors. So this is what a connector does. If you see, the first one enables mail flow within Office 365 and your on-premises Exchange environment. When I say on-premises Exchange environment, not always necessary that it should only be the Exchange online environment. Maybe I would be using a certain amount of a specific website, or I have my own on-premises environment, or I'm using such a relay services which forwards the email coming in from my organization to my Office 365, and from there it goes out to the internet. So in those cases, connectors are required, and these also apply security restrictions. When we say security restrictions, so the very first medium which comes into the picture is the security, the TLS, the transport layer security. Any connector which gets created within Office 365 is by default works on the latest TLS 1.2 architecture, meaning that is the TLS security with version 1.2, which has its own way of mechanism, wherein it would be a complete channel, a bridge, a medium, through which the email channel gets encrypted. Not the content of the email, but the complete channel through which the email would flow. That complete channel gets encrypted, and that goes up in an encrypted format. So that is called as security, and it goes through TLS secure connection with version 1.2. And you also can enable notifications using the connector and a transport rule, that if there's any email which is coming from a printer or a non mailbox entity, so what to do in that scenarios, whether you'd like to have an email notification getting triggered, you need to have an alert policy getting triggered, so that the administrators of your organization are actually aware of it and using it, they can easily notify this and investigate it further, as if whether it was a secure connection or a secure email which came through, and what event made it triggered. So all these things can be done with the connector, which is the most important aspect of a mail flow. So how many types of connectors are there in Office 365? So when we speak about types, unlike on premises, which has send connectors, as the name itself says, so whichever mailbox which are there in the on premise organization, so from that mailbox, the connector send connector would be used, and it would start sending emails from your on premises organization to external, that is to the internet. And we have a receive connector in the on premises, so that would receive the emails from internet to your organization. Similar to that, we have the naming context given here with the name of inbound connector and outbound connector. So you can relate inbound connector with receive connector. This connector would be used to receive emails from over the other organization or over the internet to your Office 365 organization. And when we say outbound connector, so yes, these are the ones, these kinds of connectors are the ones through which you would be sending emails from your Office 365 hosted mailbox over the internet. Now it could be a tossy situation over here, whether how would you like to get your connector configured, because within these things there's also one thing called as smart host. Now what this smart host does is, in order to be able to understand that, you need to first basically understand the email flow and the structure behind that. Whenever we send an email to someone, so the very first thing the email mechanism or the architecture does is it catches the MX record of the recipient's domain. Meaning, if I have one domain with Rizwan at abc.com and the other one would be John at gmail.com, so once and abc.com is with Office 365. So this domain, what it does is, when in the to field, I would be writing an email to user John, that is John at gmail.com, in my to field. So what this email would do is, the very first thing, the moment I click on my send button, after getting it configured with the basic mail flow structure, wherein an email goes from a delivery queue, a submission queue, all those things are done. And once it gets out, so the very first thing it catches from the recipient's side is the domain. So my Office 365's environment would check whether gmail.com exists or not. So Gmail would have published its own MX record. So this Office 365's abc.com would try to find the MX record for Gmail. If that MX record exists, it is going to deliver the email to that MX. Now what MX would do, it would check if this domain exists. I would check whether John user exists into Gmail domain. If John's user is there, whether the user is active or not, it would check it its own active directory. It would check with the license whether John has a proper license or not. If it has a license, whether it has a valid mailbox or not. And if all these checklists are passed, then it is going to go ahead and deliver the email to John at gmail.com. Once it enters their organization, now there would be a separate spam filter layer which would decide whether this email is a fishy email, a normal email, a bulky, like any kind of scenarios could be present, whether it would be a malicious email. So all these checks are done once the email reaches the recipient server, and the job of the spam filtering then gets started. So this is a normal mail flow. What happens is, when we send an email, it directly goes to the MX record of the recipient. Now, as I told you, there's one thing which is called a smart host. Now what complex environment tend to do is, if you would be using any third party filtering services like Mimecast, Barracuda, and so on, so their job, or their ask is that the emails flowing out from Office 365's mailbox should not directly go to the internet. When I say internet, definitely it would be recipients MX. So their requirement is, they'd like to have one more filtering. They would use Microsoft's mailboxes for hosting purposes, for storage purposes, but they'd not like to get it referred using Microsoft 365 EOP services. So what they do is, they enter a smart host. So within the outbound connector, initially it was catching the MX record for the recipient side, but this time what it is going to do is, if we enter the value of let's say Mimecast. So we would be entering the IP addresses or the FQDN of Mimecast. So what Office 365's job over here would be just to hand over the email to Mimecast, and what Mimecast does after that, whether it delivers the email to the recipient side over the internet or it fails it, now it would be a completely looked by Mimecast, because our job here was to deliver the email to smart host. And we, even if we are going ahead and performing a message trace on that, so yes, at our side it would say that if our email shows as delivered, in simple words it would just mean that yes, my email was just delivered from my Office 365 environment to the smart host, that is Mimecast. What happened after that? So there would be a similar kind of a message trace portal on Mimecast available, and it would be checked that when an email received at Mimecast, so what happened with that email, you'd be able to get that information from Mimecast portal. Office 365 would not be able to tell you those details. So this is the work of a smart host. If you would be injecting a smart host in the middle, we say it as man in the middle. So our job is to only deliver the email to the man in the middle and not to the recipient directly. So this is what all is the inbound connector and the outbound connector. That is all from my side for this one. I am quickly showing you and taking you through how does a connector actually looks like. So if you check in via mail flow connectors, I have pretty much of the connectors created. So whenever you see the two side, to here means the destination, from means the source. So whenever in the to field in the destination side you see Office 365, so those are considered as internal or inbound connectors. Okay, so whichever connection which is reaching or receiving to Office 365, they are considered as inbound connectors. So these connection is coming from the internet, okay, or from the organization to Office 365. And wherever you see Office 365 in the from field, that is considered as an outbound connector. So these are outbound connector, meaning these two connectors, test to Gsoft and this one in over here. Whenever Office 365's mailbox would send an email, so according to the condition which gets met, these connectors would be used. These are called as the outbound connectors. Let's quickly have a look at this connector. What does this connector over here means? Okay, so this is, you see, from your organization to Office 365. Let's say if I click on edit, so there is a limitation with the inbound connector that Office 365 could receive connections only on two bases, either on an IP address or on a certificate based connection. So when I click on certificate based connection, every certificate, the SSL certificate, have its own FQDN, whether it is a single SAN certificate, a multiple SAN certificate, or even a wildcard certificate like star at domain.com. You just need to add that certificate's name over here, and whichever IP addresses which would be binded behind that FQDN, automatically Office 365 would take it from the global DNS or from the internet. But let's say if you're using any third party printer and you have developed your own application and that printer is deployed onto that specific static public IP, and what you want is you would be configuring that a mailbox within that printer, and that mailbox would be hosted within Office 365. So at that time, if you would start sending on emails, basically the sender would receive an NDR. Why? Because ideally that mailbox is supposed to be sending emails using outbound directly to the internet, but since you have made the printer in between and configured the Office 365 mailbox, you would be adding that IP address of the printer over here. So what it would do is, from the mailbox, the connection would come from this IP address that would belong to the printer, and from the printer it would then take it to the internet stating. So once we would be adding that IP address in over here, so Office, basically we are telling Office 365 that if any connections comes from this IP address, please accept it and please have a trust on it. Basically we are creating a trust relationship using this connector, and Office 365 would check that I have added this IP address, and whichever connection which would come to me with this specific IP address, I'm going to allow it. This is what basically a connector means and an inbound connector means. Similar to it, if you would check with this, these two connectors usually gets created when you deploy a hybrid environment, HCW, when you run hybrid configuration visit. So this is outbound to a unique grid which is given by the hybrid connector visit. Now if we see in this like picture over here, edit routing. So this would be giving you the name as if what is the routing, how does the routing looks alike. So what does this means is that every email which would be going out from Office 365 mailbox, and if that has in the to field, if it has the address as this, let's say I've added this, so this I purchased a certificate with this name that was mail.nuri12.com. So what this means is that this is basically the FQDN of my SSL certificate. I published it and I inform Microsoft that see, every connection which is going on from Office 365 mailbox and it is going to this IP address, please trust this. What is going to happen after that? So we'll see this. When I click on next, it is going to ask for the routing address and it is going to ask for the FQDN. So I have to provide that as certificate name over here, the FQDN within the A certificate. The moment I'll be clicking on that and click on validate, automatically it would be checking with the settings, it would send a test email and automatically the validation would go on. So this is how we configure an outbound connector, and it also has its security restriction. If you see this, if I want all my Office 365 connections going through these connections, and if I did not want these security, the TLS security, ideally this is not a recommended practice, by default it is turned on. So if I turn this on, automatically whichever connection which gets initiated from this connector, by default for all of the secure mails, would have a secure mail flow, and it would go through this TLS 1.2 enhancement. And if I need to use this using the SAN name, you see the subject alternative name, what does this means is that basically Office 365 would enable TLS against this certificate, and I need to deploy this certificate on my on-premises server, which would take the guarantee that yes, the connections coming on this FQDN is secure. You see, how did Office 365 connect your email server? So again, we would be providing the same email address. It would be validating it, and once we click on validate, automatically that connection would go and get validated. And this is the place where if you directly need to validate the connector, if all of your settings over here are correct, you can just go ahead and click on validate connector. That is it. And you see, this was the place I was talking about, use of connector. How would you like to make this Office 365 connector being used? So for email messages sent to all accepted domains, so whichever accepted domains would be there into this field, so whichever domains we add in our Office 365, so just enable this connector for all those accepted domains. Only when I have a transport rule set up that redirects. Let's say if I would be creating a transport rule which say that if I would be sending an email from Office 365 to a specific domain or to a specific user, then use or route those emails using this connector, and then this connector would get used. So in my case, what I have done is any emails, so you see this is domain, I've added this domain Nori 12 in Cloud Office 365, and I also have this domain in my Exchange on premises. I have Exchange 2010. So what this means is that irrespective of whenever a person tries to send in an email whose domain name is nuri12.com, so at that time let those connections flow from this connector. This is what this radio button means. And once this is done, specify a user to flow this connector. So it would require a user from nuri12.com, irrespective of whether nuri12.com is present in cloud, that is in Office 365, or in the on premises. I would just require that user. The moment you click on validate, automatically an email would get triggered for that mailbox stating that this was a validation test for this specific connector, and these settings would get saved. And you can also turn this collector on or off. If you see the status in over here, basically right now all my connectors are turned on. In case if you need to turn off any such connector, you can just go ahead and click on off, so that the connector would get turned off. But be very specific if you would be doing this in a production environment, so you have to be very cautious and careful, because just doing with this on and off tweak can completely break down your mail flow, and it would be completely, you know, a downtime. So unless you have any very thorough knowledge on this, then only try and get engaged on this. This was all from my side from the connectors and the mail flows point of view. We'll be discussing the remaining topics like SPF, GKM and mail flow in a future coming videos, or further coming videos. That is all from my side for this specific video. I hope you guys liked it, and if you have any further queries or questions, feel free to contact me on info@alifconsulting.com. You take care of yourself and you stay safe. Have a good day. Take care and bye bye.